The sun hung high over the dusty town of Millfield, casting long shadows against the weathered buildings. Jake stood behind the counter of a small convenience store, his eyes glazing over as he flipped through an old magazine. The bell above the door jingled softly, snapping him back to reality. He looked up just as she walked in. Her name was Sarah. She stepped inside, a thin sheen of sweat glistening on her brow, her eyes darting around like a frightened bird. Jake noticed the tremble in her hands as she reached for the fridge door. It was just a moment, a slight shiver that spoke volumes. He experienced a sharp pang of empathy, sensing she needed something more than just a cold drink. His voice was steady, though a part of him felt riled by the look in her eyes. "Just some water, please," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, moving quickly to open the fridge. He handed her the bottle. He caught sight of her fingers, still quivering like leaves caught in a breeze. He asked, the concern slipping through his usual casual demeanor. She hesitated, taking the water but not drinking it. Instead, she sat on a flower-patterned chair in the corner, her eyes suddenly blank, as if she had vanished inside herself. Jake felt a strange pull, an urge to understand her silent struggle. He ventured, trying to lighten the air, but the words felt hollow as they hung between them. She didn't respond, just stared into space, and Jake could feel a heavy weight enveloping the store. After what felt like an eternity, she took a deep breath. I don't know what to do anymore," she finally whispered, her voice trembling more than her hands had. Jake's heart raced. Just then she looked directly into his eyes, and he saw a flicker of pain, like shadows danced in the light of a flickering candle. "My husband." The air thickened as she spoke, each word heavy with emotion. "He was my everything." A tear escaped and glistened down her cheek. The confession resurfaced buried feelings within Jake. He remembered the despair he felt when he lost his younger sister to a sudden illness. Time had twisted itself in painful loops, those endless nights spent waiting for hope to walk through the door. He could relate to her sorrow, the way it clung to a person like a shadow they could never shake off. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, his voice softer now, but that didn't change the reality of her pain. He leaned against the counter, his magazine forgot. "I can't imagine what that must be like," he added, wishing to share support, however small it may be. "Every day is just a reminder," she said, her voice breaking. "We were supposed to build a life together." A fresh wave of tears rolled down her cheeks, and she buried her face in her hands. The tears pulled at Jake's heart, twisting something inside of him. Seeing someone else's pain often opened the door to his own. He stepped out from behind the counter, surprising himself. He asked softly. A wave of gratitude washed over him when she looked up, the tiniest tremble of hope flickering in her eyes. She nodded. "Let's sit outside." He led her to a small bench under an ancient oak tree, its thick branches serving as a shelter from the harsh sun. The world outside the store felt different. The noise faded, and it seemed like a moment was given just for them to breathe. Sarah took a drink from her water bottle, and with a deep sigh the words flowed, spilling like a river unleashed. She talked about her husband, the laughter they shared, the dreams they built, and then the day everything changed. He was a runner, always on the go. "One day he just collapsed. They told me it was serious." Her voice dripped with vulnerability, and each sentence struck like a chord inside Jake. He listened intently, feeling the weight of her every word. He had spent so long shying away from his own grief, but there was something about vulnerability that was soothing, almost healing. "I'm scared," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "scared of losing him, scared of what comes after." Jake nodded slowly, searching for the right words. "It can feel like a storm you can't escape, can't control," he said, recalling the nights he spent crying in the shadows of his grief. "But you don't have to walk through it alone." The vulnerability hung in the air, unspoken but felt deeply. For the first time, he watched as a flicker of hope returned to Sarah's eyes, if only for a moment. She asked, softening as she met his gaze. "Yeah, my sister," he admitted, trying to keep his voice steady. "She was everything to me." The pain stung again, but he felt lighter having shared it. Tears glistened in her eyes, but there was strength growing in her fragile frame. "I didn't for a long time," Jake replied. "I buried myself in work, tried to forget. But one day I realized that it was okay to feel lost. What helped me was talking to others who cared, those who understood. Eventually, I learned that heartache is part of love." He watched Sarah absorb his words, her expression shifting. She drew her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Her voice trembled again, but there was a softness now, like a flower slowly beginning to bloom. Jake smiled gently. Love lingers, even when things seem bleak. It twists and turns, but never truly goes away. Sarah's breaths turned steadier as they spoke, and before long they wandered deeper into the conversation. They talked about the little moments, the magic of life, the joy of simply existing in someone else's heart, the way their laughter intertwined with memories, even in pain. Hours slipped away in conversation, and as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the warmth of the evening embraced them. Sarah's trembling eased, the quiver in her hand slowly fading, replaced by an easing belief that she wasn't alone. "Thank you, Jake," Sarah finally said, her voice steady now. "I didn't think I would feel lighter today." He nodded, warmth blooming in his chest. As they stood up, the weight of the world didn't vanish, but small fragments of hope began to paint the edges of that weight with color. The two walked back towards the store slowly. The sun's last rays cast a golden glow around them as laughter danced in their shared silences. As they approached the door, she smiled back at him, the trembling gone, replaced instead by an emboldened spirit. "Neither will I," Jake replied, feeling something precious settle in his heart. As she stepped outside, Sarah turned and waved, her silhouette framed against the orange horizon. Jake watched her walk away, feeling lighter, knowing the connection they shared was more than a fleeting moment in a small town. In that dusty convenience store, what began with a request for water blossomed into something deeper. In the midst of their individual storms, they had found a little shelter together, a reminder that heartache intertwined lives, not meant to isolate but bridge the gaps of sorrow. And sometimes, all it took was a little kindness to bring light back into the shadows. The breeze whispered through the cracked windows of the old gas station as the neon sign flickered outside, casting an eerie glow in the dimly lit room. Jake leaned against the counter, flipping through an outdated magazine he had read a dozen times. Just then, the door creaked open and in walked a figure that sent a jolt through him. She stood at the entrance, a silhouette against the harsh sunlight pouring in like golden floodwater. Her clothes were simple, but her presence was anything but. He could see it in her eyes, an electric mix of desperation and vulnerability. The bell above the door jingled softly, breaking the silence, and she stepped inside. Jake asked, curious, "Just water, please," she breathed, urgency in her voice. He blinked, noting the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the fridge door. The trembling wasn't just a reaction to the heat outside, it spoke of something deeper. Jake quickly grabbed a bottle of water, and as he handed it to her, he felt the weight of her gaze. He asked, something in him wanting to pull her into a space of trust. She took the bottle, yet didn't drink. Instead, she clutched it tightly, her knuckles white as she glanced away, her demeanor cracking under the surface. "Not really," she whispered, her voice fragile like a thread about to snap. Jake's heart tightened. It was a small confession, yet it hit him like a freight train. He could see the fear etched into her features, the way her breath came in short bursts. He pressed gently, stepping closer. She shook her head, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, defiance, perhaps. "No, I just need a moment," she said, biting her lip as she sank into a rickety chair in the corner. The tension in the room hung thick, as if the air itself was anxious to hear her story. Jake glanced at the clock. Time felt frozen as he watched her. There was something unsettling yet magnetic about her presence. "Sometimes talking helps," he offered softly. She looked up at him, surprise crossing her face. In that moment, Jake dropped the mask of indifference he usually wore. He could sense the invisible walls around her beginning to crack. "My name is Sarah," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jake," he replied, nodding. "Nice to meet you, Sarah." Her shoulders sagged like heavy rain clouds, and with a long sigh she began to open up. "I came here to find peace, I guess, my life." Jake leaned forward, captivated. A tear slipped down her cheek, glistening in the dull light. "It's my husband. He's been in and out of the hospital for months now. We used to plan everything together, our future, our dreams." With each word, Sarah's unease transformed into raw honesty, unraveling in front of him. He recognized that pain. It was the same kind that had shadowed his own life when he lost a sister to a sudden illness. Memories rushed back to him, the sleepless nights, the echoes of laughter that had turned dormant, and the sharp edges of grief that often cut into those moments of supposed peace. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he said, wishing to illuminate a path through her darkness. "He was my everything," she pressed on, the quiver in her voice betraying the fortress she was trying to build. "Now I live in fear." Jake felt tears prick the corners of his own eyes. "I know that fear," he admitted. The vulnerability in the air thickened as they both embraced their shared pain. Sarah held his gaze, and for a moment it felt as if there was no one else in the world but the two of them. She asked, her voice breaking. Jake swallowed hard, drawing from his own experience. "You learn to hold on tightly while also finding ways to let go. It's a balancing act, really," he said. "You cherish the moments, you create new memories." She was quiet, contemplating his words, the back and forth of their lives intertwining. "Then you build new ones," he replied, using the strength he wished he had found for himself long ago. "Find beauty in the cracks." She took a breath, as if she were gathering strength from those very words. She asked, her eyes searching his. Jake felt the honesty ripple between them. "I didn't for a long time. I bottled everything up until it felt like I was going to explode. I isolated myself, thinking I could handle it all. But one day I realized I needed help. I needed to talk to people who understood." He watched as her eyes shimmered with understanding. "No," he affirmed, his voice steady. "You're not alone, none of us are." Suddenly a wave of emotion surged through her, and she leaned forward, recounting storytelling after storytelling, laying bare the beautiful memories of their life together. Each laugh, every smile, they painted vivid pictures that pulled Jake into their world, a world now drenched in shadows, yet lit by vibrant warmth. "We loved to dance in the kitchen," she chuckled through the tears. "He'd spin me around, twirling to the music." Jake smiled, feeling the heartbeat of her story. "That sounds beautiful. Did you ever think of recreating it?" Her brow furrowed, processing the thought. "I could. I haven't even tried. I've been so caught up in the hospital visits, the endless tests." "There's still time," Jake encouraged, a warmth blooming in his chest. Happiness isn't a straight line, it twists and turns, sometimes hiding in unexpected places. Sarah wiped away the last of her tears, a flicker of strength returning to her eyes. Maybe I do need to dance again, she mused, allowing a tentative smile to creep across her face. The moment breathed life into the room, brightening the shadows that had once seemed suffocating. She straightened up, her posture more assured. You know, talking to you really helps, she said. Jake chuckled, a sense of pride swelling inside him. It's amazing the connections we can make, isn't it? Just then, the bell jingled again, bringing them back to their surroundings. A few customers entered the gas station, but the energy had shifted. Sarah stood, clenching the bottle of water as if it were a talisman, a newfound determination sparking in her eyes. She turned toward Jake, her expression brightening with gratitude. Thank you, Jake, thank you for listening. He nodded, feeling a warmth swell between them. And thank you for sharing your story. They stepped outside, the warm evening air welcoming them like an old friend. The sun hung low, casting a golden hue on the horizon. Sarah inhaled deeply, the weight of her grief still present, but now somehow lighter. I think I will go home and dance in the kitchen tonight, she said, her spirit rekindled. Who knows, Jake smiled, the connection they forged cemented forever in that small corner of the world. Just remember, you have the strength within you to create that light. As she walked away, her silhouette brightened against the sunset. Jake felt like he had witnessed something transformative. Sometimes in the midst of darkness, allowing ourselves to open up could be the dawn breaking through the night. He turned back into the store, a renewed sense of purpose igniting within him. It was a simple exchange, a request for water leading into vulnerability, understanding, connection. Little did he know, he had not just given Sarah water, but a hope that could flow like a river, washing away the barriers forged by fear. With every life they touched, with every story shared, they found pathways back to themselves and each other. Life wasn't just about moments of despair, it thrived in love and light, even amidst storms. And in that dusty gas station, against the backdrop of an ordinary day, they both discovered the extraordinary power of simply being there for another. The bell above the door jingled softly as she stepped into the tiny convenience store, her presence like a sudden chill in the summer heat. Jake looked up from behind the counter, immediately struck by the tremor in her hands. The sunlight streamed in, illuminating her features, and he noticed the sheen of perspiration on her brow, a subtle indication that something was wrong. Jake asked, his friendly tone cutting through the tension hanging in the air. Just some water, please, she replied, her voice a delicate whisper. He nodded, moving quickly to open the fridge. As he grabbed a bottle, he caught sight of her fingers trembling as she reached for it, as if every movement was a struggle. The worry etched on her face ignited a spark of concern deep within him. He asked, sincerity coloring his tone. Her eyes flickered, darting away from his gaze as she clutched the bottle tighter. I'm fine, she muttered, but her voice cracked, betraying her. Jake wasn't convinced. There was an urgency in her posture, a palpable fear he wondered about. You don't look fine, he said, softening his tone. She hesitated, shifting her weight from foot to foot. She seemed to be battling a silent storm inside. I'm just trying to get through the day, she finally admitted, her voice shaky. He leaned against the counter, the old wood creaking under his weight. Sometimes those days can feel really heavy. A fleeting look of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly pulled the curtain back down. I don't want to waste your time, she said, casting her gaze down. It's never a waste, he replied earnestly, wanting to reach her through the invisible barrier she had erected. Jake could see the walls around her were high and fortified, but there was a depth in her eyes, a longing for honesty that made him feel a connection. They stood in silence for a moment, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound filling the room. My name is Lee, she finally offered, looking back up at him, her brow furrowed with uncertainty. Jake, he said. She took a small sip of the water, but the nervous tremor in her hands didn't disappear. I don't usually come into places like this, she confessed, glancing around as if she might be discovered. He asked, genuinely curious. I don't usually ask for help. I've always prided myself on being independent. She paused, swallowing hard, the weight of her words hanging between them like a dense fog. Jake asked gently, allowing her to unfold her story at her own pace. Lee took a shaky breath, her eyes glistening like trapped stars. I lost my job a few months ago. It was a good job, the kind that feels secure. When I lost it, everything just... Jake could feel the frustration pouring from her, the fear bubbling beneath the surface. He recognized that sensation all too well. It was like being captured in a relentless storm you couldn't escape. I'm sorry, he said, his voice steady. Yeah, she continued, her voice growing stronger now. Then my dad got sick. Out of nowhere, he just collapsed. The doctors say it's serious. Jake listened as she spoke of her struggles, feeling her pain pierce through the usual banter he shared with customers. Here was a woman caught in a collision of struggles, desperately trying to hold everything together. It feels like every time I get a little ahead, I'm knocked back down again, Lee said, her voice cracking as the tears began to swell. I just feel so. Jake nodded slowly, understanding all too well how life had a way of tipping its scales unfairly. Being lost like that is one of the hardest experiences. He thought of his own journey through pain, his own struggles to regain his footing after devastating loss. She asked, her eyes searching his. Every single day, Jake replied honestly. It's easy to feel like you're spiraling out of control, but you're not alone in this. She asked, a flicker of curiosity lighting her gaze. There's something powerful in shared experiences. When we open up, it creates a connection, a bridge that can help us not feel so isolated, he explained. Lee took a shuddering breath, the reality of her situation hitting her full force. I've tried to be strong to hold everything together, but sometimes my mind just goes dark. Jake recognized that familiar ache, the midnight hours that stretch endlessly when worry takes hold. Those thoughts can be suffocating, he said gently. The silence between them grew thick again, but this time it felt more bearable, filled with unspoken understanding. Lee wiped at her eyes, and the tremble in her hands still lingered, but she seemed calmer, as if his words were resonating deep inside her. I thought I could do it all by myself, she said softly, her voice quaking slightly. But now I'm realizing that maybe I need to let people in. You start just like this, Jake encouraged. You don't have to share everything at once. Lee nodded, swallowing hard as she contemplated his words. I guess I've been afraid of burdening others with my problems, she admitted, her gaze falling to the floor. It is okay, Jake assured, feeling emboldened, and it's powerful. The more we share our struggles, the more we build genuine connections. As Lee processed his words, he noticed the tremors in her hands beginning to ease. Perhaps she was finally starting to believe there was courage in vulnerability. Maybe I can try, she said, a tentative smile breaking through her clouds of uncertainty. Start with small steps, Jake said, feeling a sense of pride swell, even if it's just a conversation with a friend or a loved one. Lee regarded him with gratitude, and the moment between them felt significant, as if they had crossed an unseen barrier together, transforming mutual pain into a shared trajectory. Thank you, Jake, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He smiled, feeling the warmth of connection wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. I'm glad you came in here today, Lay. Just then, the bell above the door chimed again as another customer entered, and Jake felt the energy shift. Lee stood up, clutching the bottle of water like a lifeline. Her shoulders were straighter, her eyes shimmering with determination. I think I will go home and call my dad, she said, her voice steadier now. I want to tell him I've got this. That's the spirit, Jake said, his heart swelling with hope. The tremors that had once consumed her now seemed to vanish, replaced by the strength born from shared understanding. As she moved toward the door, Lee turned back and looked him in the eye. You've made an impact on my day. I'm just paying it forward, he replied, feeling the ease in his heart grow. With that, Lee stepped back outside, the warm glow of the sun washing over her. She walked away with purpose, leaving Jake to absorb the moment they had shared. Inside the store, time resumed its regular pace, but something new lingered in the air. He felt lighter, invigorated by their brief encounter. Weeks turned into months, and Jake often found himself thinking of Lei and the way she had come into his life just when he needed it most. He witnessed her smiling face flash in his mind and felt the warmth she left behind in that tiny convenience store. One afternoon, as the sun painted the sky with deep hues of orange and purple, the door swung open again. With a smile, Lee walked in, but this time there was a glow about her, an unmistakable light radiating from her. She exclaimed, the joy in her voice carrying an energy that filled the room. He felt his face break into a wide grin, warmth flooding his heart. That's amazing. An administrative assistant at the community center, she beamed. Jake felt his heart leap with joy. I knew you could do it. There's more, she said with a sparkle in her eye. I started a support group for others going through tough times. His chest swelled with pride. That's truly incredible. Lee laughed, the sound bright and infectious. I realized that talking and sharing experiences don't just help you, they help everyone involved. In that moment, Jake felt the powerful ripple of what they had created. Their initial encounter, which had started with a request for water, morphed into a journey of healing and hope, an intertwined connection in the heart of a small town. As she left the store, Lee turned back one final time. Thank you for believing in me, Jake. Jake waved, a content smile on his face as she stepped away, the sun illuminating her path. From behind the counter, he realized that sometimes the simplest moments, a request for water, a shared conversation, could spark profound change. In the end, they were all looking for connection, searching for the light even through the shadows. And as the world spun on, Jake knew that he would carry those stories with him, forever reigniting the hope that, with kindness and understanding, they could weather any storm together. The heavy wooden door creaked as she stepped into the dimly lit convenience store, the bell above it chiming like a distant warning. Jake looked up, instinctively wiping his hands on his apron, a routine he'd followed countless times. But something about her presence felt different, unsettling in a way. She was drenched in sweat, the heat outside clinging to her like a shroud. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame, and as she approached the counter, he noticed her hands shaking, barely able to grasp her phone. Could I? She asked, her voice trembling just like her hands. Jake moved swiftly to the fridge, grabbing a bottle from the bottom shelf and handing it to her. But as she took it, he felt a jolt. Her fingers felt colder than the bottle itself. he asked, unable to mask the concern lacing his voice. I'm fine, she replied quickly, but the lie hung between them heavily. It didn't take a psychologist to see the cracks in her facade. There was fear in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that settled in the pit of his stomach. He asked, trying to pierce through the protective wall she had built. Ella, she said, her gaze avoiding his as she unscrewed the bottle with a trembling hand. Nice to meet you, Ella, Jake said, leaning against the counter, hoping to ease the tension thickening the air. Taking a sip of water, she sighed, as if summoning the courage to share her burden. The words spilled out laden with despair. Jake's heart sank. You can talk to me. With a barely there nod, Ella's defenses softened, and she finally met his gaze. It's been hard lately. My life feels twisted. Jake asked, genuinely curious. Tears gathered in her eyes, and she bit her lip, fighting against the storm brewing inside her. I lost my job last month, and I've been struggling to make ends meet. My husband, he's been sick for a while now. The confession hit Jake like a fist to the gut. He could see the weight of the world resting on her slender shoulders. I'm really sorry, Ella, that sounds incredibly tough, he said, silently hoping his words could provide comfort. It's just... I thought I could handle it, she continued, her voice cracking. But the stress, the panic, it's overwhelming. A memory flared in Jake's mind. A few years ago, he had experienced a dark period where everything he held dear slipped away. The feeling of being lost in the chaos, wandering without a compass, desperately gasping for air was all too familiar. You're not alone in that feeling, he told her solemnly. I just keep thinking about what's next, she said, her voice laced with anxiety. What if I can't find a job soon? What if my husband gets worse? Your feelings are valid, Jake reassured, wishing he could reach through the counter and pull her into a warm embrace. Facing uncertainty can be incredibly tough. Ella nodded but didn't speak, her eyes filled with a depth of emotion that stirred something within him. He saw herself reflected back. Meetings with old friends now felt like dreams long gone. He asked gently. I thought about it, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, but I'm embarrassed. I always prided myself on being strong. That's a common misconception, he said, hoping to shift her perspective. Asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, it's an act of strength. The flicker of understanding ignited in her eyes, a moment of clarity cutting through the haze of despair. Jake watched as she took a deep breath, visibly calming. Maybe you're right, she said slowly. Just start with one step, he encouraged, noticing her grip on the water bottle loosening. Maybe reach out to a friend or look for support. Okay, maybe I will, she said, allowing her lips to curl into a tentative smile. For the first time, he felt like they were bridging a connection, a shared understanding woven in the fabric of their conversation. Suddenly, the bell rang again, a loud interruption cutting through their exchange. A group of people stumbled into the store, laughter echoing off the walls. Jake glanced at the newcomers, and for a brief moment, Ella seemed to withdraw again, retreating into the safety of her own shell. Hey, I just wanted to let you know, he said quickly. It's absolutely okay to take your time. Don't rush to feel better. Thank you, she said softly, her eyes returning to his, a spark of gratitude momentarily lighting the shadows. As the group moved around the store, Jake's attention flickered between Ella and the new customers. Chatter filled the room, punctuated by bursts of laughter, but through it all he kept an eye on her, noting the slightly ashen color of her face, the way her fingers now played with the label on the water bottle. He suggested, sensing the overwhelming atmosphere. Ella nodded, relief washing over her features. They stepped outside into the warm evening light, the sun dipping low on the horizon, casting a golden glow across the parking lot. Jake asked, taking a deep breath himself. Much, she replied, visibly relaxing as she stood next to him. See, small steps, Jake encouraged, feeling a sense of warmth between them. Leaning against the railing, Ella looked out at the fading daylight, the shadows growing longer, their edges softening in the twilight. She said, vulnerability creeping back into her voice. Jake turned to her, holding her gaze. Then you keep searching, you lean on your support system, the people who care about you. She asked, a hint of confusion in her tone. Kindness costs nothing, Jake replied, feeling his heart swell with empathy. We all go through difficult times, it's what connects us as human beings. Ella nodded, taking in his words. You're right. Just then, a flicker of movement caught Jake's eye. He turned and spotted an elderly woman struggling to pull her shopping cart across the lot. Hey, let's go help her, he said, already starting to move. Without hesitating, Ella followed him. Together, they walked over to the woman, who looked up with grateful eyes as they approached. Thank you so much, she said, her voice worn but filled with gratitude. They helped her with her cart. Jake felt a sense of purpose wash over him. He glanced at Ella, noticing a softness spreading across her face, her earlier tension dissolving under the warmth of connection and shared kindness. That is so true, Ella replied, a smile starting to return. After assisting the woman to her car and exchanging warm goodbyes, Jake and Ella stepped back into the quiet of the parking lot. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of purple and orange. Thank you, she said again, sincerity woven into the fabric of her words. This was really meaningful. It's no problem at all, Jake replied, feeling a profound sense of joy. As they stood together in the fading light, Ella looked more at ease than before, her gaze filled with newfound resolve. "I think I can begin making those calls tomorrow," Jake encouraged. "Every little step counts," she asked, her expression brimming with gratitude. "Absolutely," he said, feeling genuine warmth radiating between them. As they exchanged smiles, the connection they had formed felt like a lifeline in each other's lives. In that moment, they both realized they were not merely strangers passing by, but two souls forging a bond amid the chaos of life. "I never imagined today would turn out like this," Ella said, her eyes sparkling with a renewed sense of hope. Jake chuckled, feeling a sense of warmth woven through their random encounter. Time slipped through their fingers as they stood together in the parking lot, the world around them fading into a blur. In that small, fleeting encounter, they had transformed their individual struggles into shared strength, a reminder that vulnerability, when embraced, leads to connection and healing. When it was finally time to part ways, Ella took a deep breath, her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jake, for noticing me when I felt invisible, for reminding me that it's okay to ask for help." He smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in his chest. "Just remember to keep reaching out." With a final wave, Ella turned and walked away, her silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights. As she disappeared into the night, Jake felt a wave of satisfaction wash over him, a reminder of the beauty that exists in human connection, even amidst chaos. In that small convenience store, among the mundane tasks of everyday life, an extraordinary moment had unfolded. Two strangers turned allies, united in their struggles and hopes for brighter tomorrows. And as he closed the shop that evening, Jake knew that any encounter could spark change, that kindness could light the darkest paths. In life's relentless storms, it's the small gestures that often yield the most significant journeys. The door swung open, and a wave of heat rushed in behind her, as if the sun had decided to step into the small convenience store for a moment. Jake was behind the counter, arranging snacks when he first saw her, the way she hesitated at the threshold, taking a breath as if she were preparing for a dive into icy water. He asked, his voice steady but curious. I just need some water," she said, her gaze darting around the cramped space filled with fluorescent lighting and the faint scent of stale coffee. Jake nodded, quickly reaching for a cold bottle from the fridge. He watched her closely as he handed it over. Her fingers trembled as they wrapped around the plastic, as if every movement required immense effort. That shiver sent a ripple of concern through him. He couldn't help but ask, noticing how her breath seemed shallow, how she flinched slightly when the cool bottle grazed her palm. She took a deep breath, and for a moment her face flickered between distress and determination, as if battling an unseen force. "It's been a long day," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He found himself leaning against the counter, the normal hustle of the store fading into a background hum. "Sometimes those long days can feel overwhelming," he said, trying to bridge the gap between them. "Yeah," she sighed, taking a small gulp of water. "It's just that everything feels heavier than usual." Jake could see the weariness etched on her face, the way her shoulders sagged under an invisible weight. "I get that," he said, half lost in his own memories. "Life can throw a lot your way all at once. There's just so much to deal with," she continued, her voice wavering. "My job isn't going well, and my mom has been sick for months." Each word she spoke hit him like stones tossed into a still pond, sending waves of empathy crashing around. He could relate more than he wanted to admit. "That sounds really tough." She shook her head, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. "My dad passed away last year, and everything has been a mess since." Jake's heart ached for her. He thought of his own struggles, how easy it was to feel isolated in a crowded room. "You don't have to have it all together. It's okay to feel lost," he said softly. Leaning against the counter, he watched her, the tremors in her hands slowly subsiding. "You've opened up quite a bit," he noted, his tone encouraging. "It takes courage to share." "Yeah, I guess I always thought asking for help would burden others," she replied, her voice trembling again. "But right now I just feel so." "That's understandable," Jake said. "Many people share that fear, but it's crucial to acknowledge when life becomes too heavy." As she looked up at him, he noticed the flicker of something in her gaze, maybe hope, or maybe just the realization that she didn't have to face everything alone. "Thank you for listening," she said. "Sometimes it's easier with a stranger," he said back. She smirked, a flicker of warmth breaking through the cloud of her sadness. "I guess that's true. You really don't," Jake replied. The air between them felt lighter now, the weight of her worries momentarily lifted. She asked, finally breaking the barrier. "Jake," he said, smiling slightly. She paused, taking a moment to collect her thoughts. "I like to spend my free time hiking," he replied. "Being out in nature helps clear my mind." "I've wanted to," she admitted, her breath deepening as she considered the idea. "Well, I can't promise it'll solve everything," Jake said, "but it can help you find some clarity." Ella nodded, hope swirling in her eyes. "Maybe that's something I could try." "Absolutely. Even a short walk can reset your perspective," Jake encouraged. As the conversation flowed, the pressure in the room seemed to ease. Ella glanced down at the water bottle again, her grip still firm but relaxed. "I can't believe how much better I feel just talking," she said, surprise in her tone. "Talking helps," he agreed. As they stood there, sharing snippets of their lives, Jake noticed small wins in Ella's demeanor. The tension slowly faded from her shoulders, her eyes started to twinkle with a spark of resilience. But suddenly the door swung open again and the bell jingled. A group of boisterous teens came flooding in, their raucous laughter filling the store. Jake tried to juggle his attention between customers while keeping an eye on Ella, who again seemed to retreat into herself, the warmth fading from her expression. "Hey, it's all right," he said, his voice deliberately calm. "Take your time." "No, it's fine," she replied, forcing a smile as she quickly wiped her face. "You don't have to rush back into the chaos," he reminded her. Ella stepped outside, the cool evening air washing over her like a soothing balm. Jake followed closely, wanting to protect that fragile spark of resilience still burning within her. "Looking out at the parking lot helps," she said, watching the sun dip below the horizon, filling the sky with hues of orange and pink. "Make it a goal," Jake suggested. "Take time each week to find a special moment, whether that's going for a walk or just stepping outside to breathe." "I think I can do that," she replied, a hint of determination creeping back into her voice. "It's a small step, but it can lead to bigger ones," he said. For a few moments they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun disappear completely, replaced by the twinkling stars of the night. In that parallel stillness, Ella's face softened, and Jake felt a sense of shared understanding blossoming between them. "You know," she said after a moment, "I never expected to feel this way today. You took that leap to share with me," he said, his voice low. She looked back at him, a gentle smile breaking through. "Thank you for being here, for listening, and I'm grateful you chose to open up," he replied, feeling a sense of warmth radiate between them. As they returned inside, the store buzzed with activity, the group of teens still animatedly chatting. Jake and Ella shared knowing glances, a mutual understanding sparking a bond that hadn't existed just a short while ago. Ella asked, glancing toward the chips and candy shelves. "Absolutely," Jake said, his smile widening. As she wandered through the aisles, picking out her favorites, Jake felt a sense of pride swell within him. Here was a woman who had dared to be vulnerable, who had shared her burdens and allowed herself to be seen. When she returned to the counter, her hands now clasping a small bag of chips and the water bottle, she seemed more grounded. "I'll never look at a convenience store the same way again," she said with a soft chuckle. "I'll take that as a win," Jake replied jovially. Ella's smile brightened. "He is," Jake agreed. As they finished up, Ella rummaged for her wallet, pulling out a few crumpled bills. "Thanks for the chat, Jake," she said as she paid, her voice warm with gratitude. The sincerity of her words washed over him like a wave. "You don't have to thank me, I promise," she said, her eyes locked onto his with earnest determination. "Good," he smiled, "and remember, you've got more strength than you realize." As she stepped outside, the cool night air embraced her, the weight of the day beginning to lift with each breath. She turned back, her smile lighting up the shadows. He called back, his heart feeling inexplicably full. As the door clicked shut behind her, Jake took a moment to let the day settle. He stood behind the counter, feeling that everything had shifted not just for her but for him as well. Sometimes, all it took to create healing was a simple gesture, a request for water, a chance to talk, and a little bit of courage to open up. In that small corner of the world, they had both discovered a shared journey, illuminated by connection and kindness, proving that through even the darkest times, there exists the possibility of light and hope. And though life would bring its challenges, they would each carry the memory of that night, a reminder that healing often unfolds in the simplest of moments. The door swung open with a soft chime, and she staggered in, her clothes sticking to her skin like a second layer of grief. Sweat dripped from her brow and her lips were cracked, whispering for hydration. Jake, behind the counter of the small convenience store, noticed her immediately, how she hesitated at the threshold, the way her hands trembled. He asked, pushing aside his magazine. "Water," she gasped, her voice trembling almost as much as her hands. Jake swiftly reached for a bottle from the fridge. He noticed her fingers shake as she received it, her entire demeanor radiating a silent panic. He asked, concern edging into his voice. "I'm fine," she said quickly, but her eyes betrayed her, darting around as if looking for an exit. "That doesn't look like fine," he replied gently, setting the bottle on the counter before her. A small smile flickered across her face, but it was fragile, like a flame fighting against the wind. She took a deep breath and opened the bottle, drinking in gulps that seemed desperate. "It's just one of those days," she murmured, trying to steady herself. "Sometimes those days can feel overwhelming," Jake said, settling back against the counter. The cool air from the fridge was refreshing, but the tension in the room felt thick enough to slice. She finally looked at him. "Yeah," he asked, hoping to break through the shell of whatever held her captive. "Ella," she replied, the tremor in her voice still evident. "Nice to meet you, Ella." "I'm Jake," he said, trying to create a little warmth in their exchange. Ella fell silent for a heartbeat, her eyes staring at the floor, shifting uneasily. "I lost my job last week," she finally said, the weight of her words like lead. "And my mom, she's in the hospital." Jake felt a wave of understanding wash over him. He had seen others struggle, how life could hit so hard it left you gasping for breath. "That's a lot to handle," he said softly. "Thank you," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "I try to be strong, for my mom. I get it." Jake's heart ached for her, a memory sparking in his mind from a time when he felt equally crushed. Ella sighed, her voice cracking. "It's all part of being human," Jake replied, watching her struggle, feeling a connection forming right there in the convenience store. "We have moments where we feel strong and others where we just." She nodded, wiping her eyes. Jake recognized that feeling all too well. It was like being in a deep, dark water, fighting against the current, gasping for air. "You're not alone in that." Ella looked up at him, the vulnerability in her gaze disarming. "How do you deal with it?" "I try to talk about it," he replied. "Sharing the burden can help." "I don't know if I've ever really shared," she admitted, her voice trembling. Jake pressed gently. "It's okay to let someone in." Ella took a shaky breath, and as she exhaled, it felt as if she was releasing some of that pent-up darkness. "You're right," she said, her voice softening. "That's a common fear," he said, feeling the air between them shift, "but leaning on others is part of what connects us as humans." The moment stretched, the noise of the store fading into a background hum. The weight of the conversation filled the space, and Jake felt the tension in Ella's body begin to ease. "Thank you for listening," she said, her voice a little steadier now. "Sometimes we need that," he said, smiling gently. Another customer entered, and Ella glanced toward the door, momentarily losing her focus. Jake watched as the warmth in her face flickered, the craziness of the day creeping back in. "I should probably go," she said, the tension creeping back into her shoulders. He suggested, wanting to maintain the fragile bond they'd just created. Ella nodded slowly, taking one more sip from the bottle before stepping outside into the cool evening air. Jake followed, closing the door behind him, and they stood together in the dim glow of the street lights, the noise of the world fading into silence. "Looking out at the parking lot helps," Ella said, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Yeah, it's important to take moments like this," Jake agreed. They stood side by side, the evening breeze weaving through their conversation like a comforting blanket. "It's strange how a conversation with a stranger can feel so refreshing," Ella mused, glancing at him with a growing spark in her eyes. "Maybe it's easier to let your guard down when you're talking to someone who doesn't know your history," he replied, leaning against the railing, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. "Exactly," she said, her shoulders relaxing as if a little air had slipped between the tightness. "Then take that feeling with you," Jake encouraged. "Hold on to it. It's okay to acknowledge your pain." As they continued to talk, the conversation flowed naturally, creating a rhythm that felt almost like a dance. Ella began to share more about her life, how her mom's illness had turned their once ordinary routines into a series of challenges. Jake listened, feeling honored that she was opening up. "I used to think life would always be predictable," she said, her voice steadying with each word. "It's remarkable how life teaches us lessons in the most unexpected ways," Jake replied, feeling the weight of her words. "Yeah, I never thought I'd be here, standing outside a convenience store, sharing my struggles with a stranger." She laughed softly, the sound lightening the atmosphere. "It's amazing how the simplest moments become significant," he said. "This conversation could be the start of something new for you." Ella shared a small smile, and for a moment, Jake felt an electric connection to souls finding solace in shared experience, even for a fleeting moment. As they talked, the world around them seemed to grow quieter, the noise fading into the background as if they were cocooned in their little bubble of truth. "I think I really needed this," Ella said, her eyes reflecting the dim light. "Remember, it's always okay to lean on others," he replied. "Life can feel like a storm sometimes." Ella nodded, the corners of her lips turning upward as she absorbed his words. "That's what we're here for," Jake said. As they walked back inside, the buzz of customers surrounded them again, but Ella seemed lighter, her steps more assured. "I think I can face today a little differently now," she said. "Good idea," Jake said, connecting with her might give you both strength. With her water bottle in hand and a newfound sense of resolve in her heart, Ella began to step toward the door. "Thank you, Jake, seriously. I'm just glad you found the courage to share," he replied warmly. With one last smile, Ella turned and walked out the door, the weight of the world beginning to lift from her shoulders. She glanced back one more time, a flicker of light in her eyes as if she were carrying hope with her. As Jake wiped down the counter, he reflected on how a simple conversation had turned into something transformative. The connection they shared, a moment that had opened the door for healing, reminded him of the strength found in vulnerability. He watched as Ella walked away, her silhouette gradually fading, but the memory of their exchange remained a small reminder that amidst the chaos, there exists the potential for kindness and empathy. Sometimes all it took was one person to notice the trembling and open a door for someone else's journey toward healing, reminding them that they were never alone. In that bustling convenience store, under the flickering fluorescent lights, life had taught him once more the beauty of shared stories and understanding hearts. The bell above the door jingled softly as she stepped in, catching Jake's eye just as he was restocking the shelves. The moment felt electric. She stood there for a heartbeat, a fragile figure stepping into the harsh fluorescent light of the convenience store, her face flushed, sweat glistening on her brow. He asked, instinctively noticing the way she swayed slightly on her feet, as if the world around her was too much to handle. Water, she gasped, her voice trembling. Without a moment's hesitation, Jake moved to the cooler at the back of the store. He pulled out a bottle and handed it to her, observing the slight shake in her hands, the way her fingers trembled around the bottle like leaves in a storm. "Here you go," he said, his concern deepening. She fumbled the bottle and he caught it before it could hit the ground. Jake asked, feeling that familiar punch of empathy in his gut. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her voice quivered, hinting at her inner turmoil. Ella was not fine, he could tell. Her eyes darted around the store, searching for something, someone, as if looking for a way out. Jake took a moment to observe her fully. She couldn't have been more than 25, her clothes frayed at the edges, and the anxious rhythm of her breathing told him she was in distress. He followed up, tilting his head slightly. She took a long sip of the water, her throat bobbing in an effort to swallow the cool relief. "It's just been a really long day," she said, her voice wavering. "I get that. Sometimes the days can stretch endlessly like dark tunnels," he said, trying to break the tension. He leaned against the counter, allowing her to collect herself. Ella looked at him, her expression shifting as if she were deciding whether to open up. "Everything feels heavy," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake's heart sank at her words. He recognized that feeling, the way burdens can pile on until it feels like there's no way to stand. "You're not alone," he said gently, hoping his words might anchor her. Another flicker of hesitation crossed her face, and Jake sensed she was battling an internal storm. "I've been trying to stay strong for my family," she confessed, her voice cracking with emotion. "My mom, she's sick." The weight of her admission settled between them, heavy and palpable. "I'm really sorry," Jake said, genuine compassion weaving through his tone. Ella wiped a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I always thought I could handle it, you know," she shook her head. Jake felt a familiar ache stirring within him. He remembered the days when he had felt lost, when each breath felt like a struggle against rising tides. "It's okay to feel like that," he said softly. "But I'm supposed to be the strong one," Ella said, frustration coloring her voice. Jake took a deep breath, understanding what she was grappling with. "Being strong doesn't mean you don't feel pain," he replied. "It's okay to lean on others, to share the load." Ella's eyes glimmered with something hope perhaps, but also a struggle to accept. "I've never really talked about this with anyone." "Talking can lighten the load in ways you wouldn't expect," Jake said, feeling the warmth of sincerity wrap around them. She looked away, glancing out the window as if searching for clarity. "I just feel so lost." "That's a common feeling," he said gently. "But failure doesn't define you, it's just a moment. What matters is how you pick yourself up and keep moving forward." Despite the turmoil swirling within her, Jake noticed Ella beginning to draw strength from his words. Slowly, she took another sip of water, the tremors in her hands beginning to settle. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted softly. "Start right here," he suggested. A flicker of appreciation crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by a shadow of doubt. "Then we find ways to cope together," Jake replied. "It's not about erasing the struggles." For a moment they stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken feelings. Ella's breath steadied, and Jake could see her processing his words, contemplating everything she had shared. "I might just give that a try," she finally said, a hint of determination in her voice. "I'm glad to hear it," he said with a warm smile, feeling a sense of hope blooming between them. "Thank you, Jake," she said, a smile breaking through her earlier sorrow. "You've given me a little bit of comfort." As they spoke, a few people entered the store, but Jake stayed focused on Ella, wanting to keep their connection alive. He prodded gently, curious about her next steps. Ella sighed again, her eyes revealing a mixture of fear and determination. "I was going to head to the hospital and spend some time with my mom. Facing it is the hardest part," he said. "Yeah," she said, the weight of his words resonating within her. "I think I need to be honest with her about how this is affecting me too." "I think you're spot on," he replied, feeling the shift in her energy. "There's power in vulnerability, even with the people we love." As she nodded, Jake saw her trembling begin to fade, the strength in her resolve sharpening. The chatter from the newly arrived customers started to fill the store, but the moment still felt special. Ella suggested, hope flickering in her eyes. "What if I just—" "That sounds like a great plan," Jake encouraged. You might be surprised by her reaction. "I really appreciate everything you've shared, Jake," she said, gratitude washing over her features. "You never know when your story can help someone else," Jake replied. As Ella turned back toward the door, she glanced at him one last time. "I feel a little lighter already." "Anytime," Jake said warmly. "You're always welcome here, whether it's for water or a conversation." With a smile that had transformed from uncertainty to a flicker of hope, Ella stepped outside, the night air washing over her. Jake watched as she disappeared into the darkness, feeling a sense of solace settle around him. Inside the store, time resumed its usual pace, but something had shifted. He felt the weight of their conversation linger, a gentle reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples of change. Not long after, another customer approached, but Jake's thoughts remained with Ella. He carried moments of their conversation with him, the flicker of connection they had shared sprouting new hope in the shadows. As the hours passed, he wrapped up his shift, the glow of the streetlights casting a warm light outside. Jake thought about how easy it is to overlook the struggles of others, the battles waged quietly within. Ella had walked into his store a trembling stranger, but she left with a spark, one that held the promise of possibility. It reminded him that no matter how dark the clouds gathered, there was always a chance for light to pierce through. Life would always throw its challenges, and sometimes all it took was a little awareness, a gentle nudge from a stranger, to find the will to rise. And in that bustling convenience store, they had shared a moment, a connection that transformed the weight of their burdens into something more manageable. The door swung open with a soft chime, and she stumbled in, her clothes clinging to her skin, the air thick with the humidity of late summer. Jake looked up from behind the counter, a routine smile fading into concern as he registered her distress. She paused just inside the entrance, taking a ragged breath, her hands trembling slightly. He asked, instinctively noting the pallor of her face and the hint of desperation in her eyes. "Just water," she gasped, her voice trembling. In an instant, Jake moved to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of chilled water. He glanced back and noticed how her fingers shook as she reached for the bottle, her gaze darting around the store like a trapped animal looking for an escape. "Here," he said, placing it on the counter in front of her. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper as she fumbled to unscrew the cap. Jake asked, leaning forward slightly, hoping to pierce through the wall of anxiety that surrounded her. "I'm fine," she lied, but he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She took a long swig from the bottle, the water spilling slightly down her chin. "You don't look fine," he pressed gently, his concern deepening. With a shaky breath, she set the bottle down. "I've just had a really long day," she said, her voice small and fragile. "Those can be rough," he replied, stepping around the counter to get a better look at her. Ella's eyes flickered to the floor, and the silence stretched between them, a moment hanging heavy with unspoken fears. "I lost my job last week," she finally confessed, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "And now, my mom is in the hospital." Jake's heart ached for her. He could see the raw pain reflected in her expression, a familiar suffering etched into her brows. "I'm really sorry to hear that," he said sincerely, feeling an urgency to let her know she wasn't alone. "Thank you," she replied, tears threatening to overflow as she spoke. "It's okay to feel that way," Jake said, his voice steady. "Life can throw so much at us at once." Ella sniffled, wiping the tears that threatened to spill. "But I'm supposed to be the strong one." "Being strong doesn't mean you don't have to feel," he said softly, taking a step closer. "It means you acknowledge what you're going through." She looked at him, a flicker of hope mingling with uncertainty. "It's just hard to ask for help," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It's one of the toughest things we face," Jake admitted. "But asking for help isn't a weakness, it's actually a brave step forward." Ella looked down, considering his words. The moment hung in the air, the two of them lost in a space suspended from time. "I guess I'm just afraid of burdening others," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded. "That fear is something a lot of people share, but remember, vulnerability is part of connection." A small glimmer of understanding sparked in her eyes, and she took another sip from the water bottle, her fingers trembling less now. "I never expected to come in here and say all this," she confessed, a hint of relief brushing her features. "Sometimes talking can be the first step toward healing," he said, feeling a warmth bloom between them. As if she were awakening from a long sleep, Ella pulled herself straighter. She asked, her curiosity piqued. "I try to put one foot in front of the other," Jake replied, "but I also remind myself that it's okay to reach out, to lean on those who care." She pressed. "I find solace in nature, hiking, being outdoors. It reminds me of how small moments can sometimes offer clarity," he said, recalling the many trails he had wandered alone, each one carrying its own lessons. "I haven't found time for myself in so long," Ella said, sinking into the weight of her emotions again. "You deserve to take care of yourself too," he reminded her. She inhaled deeply, the light between them growing brighter. "You're right. Making space for your own needs can help you show up better for others," Jake added, hoping to ignite that spark of empowerment. A small smile crept into her expression as she absorbed his words. "I think I might start by taking short walks." "I think that's a great plan," Jake said, grinning back. As they spoke, Ella seemed to grow more at ease, the burden lightening its grip. Each shared moment allowed her a little more courage, a little more space to breathe. "I can't believe how much I needed this," she said, a glimmer of gratitude lighting her eyes. "It's my pleasure," Jake replied, the warmth of a shared understanding wrapping around them like a blanket. Just then, the door swung open, letting in a rush of noise and laughter. A group of rowdy teenagers entered, their energy breaking the moment's intimacy. Ella froze for a heartbeat, the anxiety creeping back into her demeanor. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly, sensing her retreat. "Yeah, let's do that," she replied, a hint of relief washing over her features. Together, they stepped out into the cool evening air, the chaotic buzz of the store fading behind them. "It feels nice out here," Ella said, breathing in the fresh air as she leaned against the railing. "Sometimes a little space from the crowds helps," Jake agreed, glancing at the horizon, the sun slowly sinking beneath the trees. "It lets you gather your thoughts." "I can't shake the fear of what's next," she said, staring into the distance. Change takes time, he said, his voice calm, but you're already on the right path by opening up. Ella nodded, absorbing his words. The way they hung in the air felt significant, like a promise waiting to unfold. Exactly. And you have the strength within you to navigate this, he said, feeling a rush of hope in their shared moment. It's okay to have bad days. For a brief moment, she looked at him like a lighthouse in the storm. With all that's happening, I thought I wouldn't make it through. Remember, every step counts. Lean on those who care about you and don't hesitate to reach out, he said, his heart swelling with shared purpose. Ella took a deep breath, steadying herself as she stood tall. I think I can finally face today differently. Maybe I'll call my mom later and share how I've been feeling too, she said, her resolve firming. Absolutely, Jake said, supporting her newfound determination. Being honest with your mom could open the door for both of you. As they stepped back inside, Ella's posture seemed lighter, her steps more assured. The chaotic noise returned, but she seemed immune to it now. She walked over to the counter, her demeanor transformed from what it had been just a short while ago. Thank you for listening and understanding, she said, her eyes bright with newfound hope. It's my pleasure, Jake replied, feeling a warmth spread through him. As she dug around in her bag for her wallet, Jake couldn't help but think about how quickly a small moment could shift someone's trajectory. She had walked into the store feeling lost and trembling, but now she was standing tall, ready to face whatever came next. She said with a wry smile, breaking through the weighty moment. Only if you want to, Jake said with a chuckle. True enough, she replied, handing over the money but refusing to let go of the water. Great plan, he said with a nod, feeling pride in her resilience. Just as Ella turned to leave, she paused at the door, glancing back at him. I'll keep coming back for this feeling of connection. I'm glad, Jake said, a grin spreading across his face. With one last smile, Ella stepped out into the cool night, her figure gradually disappearing into the shadows of the setting sun. Jake felt a wave of fulfillment wash over him, a reminder of the bond created in simple moments of honesty and understanding. As he cleaned up the counter for the evening, he thought about the incredible journey they had shared in such a short time. Life often had a way of unveiling the extraordinary within the ordinary, revealing how a moment spent connecting could make all the difference. The bell above the door jingled again, but this time it felt different, filled with hope, connection, and future possibilities. As Jake readied himself for the next customer, he felt a surge of gratitude wash over him. Amidst the noise and chaos of life, he had helped someone find strength in vulnerability, and in doing so, had discovered a piece of that same strength within himself. They say that it's not just the connections we make with others that shape us, but the ones we allow ourselves to exist within. As Jake reflected on Ella's journey, he knew both their paths had shifted ever so slightly, each of them carrying a newfound awareness, forever marked by a moment of truth, a request for water, and the courage to be vulnerable. The door swung open with a soft jingle, and she stepped into the small, dimly lit convenience store. Jake was stacking chips at the register when he noticed her. She lingered at the threshold for a moment, gasping for breath, her eyes wide with a mix of panic and exhaustion. He called, instinctively straightening up, his gaze locked on her. Water, she replied, her voice trembling barely above a whisper. Jake moved quickly to the fridge, yanking it open. He grabbed a bottle of water and handed it to her. The moment their fingers brushed, he felt a chill run down his spine. Her hand was ice cold, and he noticed how, despite the muggy heat outside, she was shivering. He asked, studying her closely as she unscrewed the cap. I'm fine, she insisted, but her voice betrayed her. It quivered like a fragile leaf in a storm. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. She looked up, her eyes filled with something fierce, sadness, maybe a desire to reach out, but unsure how. I just had a really long day, she said, taking a long gulp from the bottle. Jake leaned against the counter, sensing there was more to her story. Long days have a way of piling up, he said carefully. Ella wiped the water from her chin, looking anywhere but at him. I lost my job last week, she admitted, her voice softer now, like someone pulling back from the world. And my mom, his heart sank. I'm sorry to hear that, he said, genuinely feeling a piece of her pain. She swallowed hard, her gaze flickering to the floor. It's just, everything feels so heavy. Jake remembered feeling that way, the sensation of being pulled underwater, fighting against the current. You're not alone in this, he said. It's okay to feel lost. I try to be strong for my family, she responded, frustration lining her voice. Strength isn't about being unaffected, he encouraged, stepping closer. It's about acknowledging your pain and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Ella glanced up, a flicker of hope sparking in her eyes. Jake nodded. Talking can help, even just sharing a moment like this can ease the burden. A soft sigh escaped her lips, the weight of her emotions settling over them like a heavy fog. I don't know if I've ever let anyone in. That fear is common, he said, feeling the tension in the air, but vulnerability can create connections you never expected. Ella fiddled with the water bottle, her fingers trembling again. You don't have to, Jake assured her. Reaching out can be a powerful step. You're not a burden, Ella. That's not what I expected to hear today, she said, a tentative smile breaking through her somber expression. Sometimes we need that, Jake replied, feeling the air in the room shift. As they stood there, lost in their shared moment, Ella's breath began to steady. Her eyes softened as she reflected on what he said. "Maybe it's time I stop running from my feelings," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Jake encouraged her. "It's a brave choice to face whatever you're holding on to." Just then, the door swung open again, pulling Ella from her thoughts. A group of teens charged in, all laughter and chaos, their energy filling the space like a tidal wave. Jake watched as Ella instinctively flinched, her expression shifting back to anxiety. "Let's step outside for a minute," he suggested, sensing her discomfort. "Yeah, let's do that," she agreed, her voice again frightened. They stepped outside into the warm evening air, and the noise receded behind them. Ella took a deep breath, relishing the moment of calm. The bright colors of the sunset painted the sky, the world around them feeling brighter than it had just moments before. "It feels nice out here," she said, a hint of relief in her voice as she leaned against the railing. "Sometimes stepping away from the chaos allows you to gather your thoughts," Jake agreed, taking the moment to appreciate how her posture had changed. She seemed a little less burdened now, a little more full of potential. "Being outside helps," she reflected, gazing at the horizon. "Let it flow," Jake encouraged. Ella nodded, taking in his words. "You're right. You owe it to yourself to share your story," he said gently. As the sun dipped lower, their conversation unfolded like a blossom, each petal revealing another layer of vulnerability. It surprised Jake how easily Ella opened up, as if she had been waiting for someone to notice her trembling spirit all along. "I guess I've been so focused on being strong for my mom that I forgot that I'm allowed to be weak too," she admitted, the tension in her voice slowly fading. "Strength and weakness aren't opposites," Jake said, watching her start to shed the layers of despair. "They coexist," Ella looked at him, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "I'll try to remember that," she replied. As they continued their conversation, Jake realized just how important this moment was, not just for her, but for him too. It was a reminder of the shared human experience, the beauty of reaching out to one another in times of darkness. "I think I can finally start facing things differently," she said softly. "Maybe I'll go visit my mom and tell her how I'm feeling." "Absolutely," Jake said, feeling pride swell within him. Just then, a loud crash interrupted their moment, pulling their attention back. A car had backfired in the distance, and Jake instinctively turned toward the noise. Ella asked, anxiety creeping back into her tone. "It's probably just a car," Jake reassured her, glancing again toward the commotion, but something felt off. Before he could say more, a couple of teenagers burst out of the store, the raucous laughter trailing behind them, fading into hurried whispers. Ella's eyes widened as she glanced at the group milling around outside, their enthusiasm filling the air. "Let's go back inside," she suggested uneasily, and for a moment their shared calm seemed to shatter. They walked inside, the door closing behind them, but suddenly the mood shifted. The laughter turned into frantic chatter, and Jake's heart raced as he picked up on the urgency in their voices. He caught snippets of their conversation. A girl was crying, a boy was pacing, and the energy in the room felt electric with tension. Jake asked, stepping toward the group as concern washed over him. One of the boys turned, fear etched across his face. "Someone got hurt." Ella's face transformed instantly. A wave of panic coursed through her, and Jake sensed her fear rising. She demanded, her voice shaking. "I don't know," he exclaimed, his eyes wide with urgency. Without a second thought, Jake grabbed his phone from his pocket. "Call 911, we need an ambulance," he shouted as he moved toward the door, adrenaline surging through him. Ella hesitated, caught between the chaos brewing around her and the walls of her own struggles. "I can't," she started, her voice faltering. Jake urged, his eyes locking onto hers. "Now is the time to be brave." In that electrified moment, Ella's determination solidified, and she rushed to grab her phone, dialing with trembling hands. The tension in the air felt thick as the group scrambled around, the panic infusing life into their movements. Jake kept his focus, marshaling the chaos, doing his best to maintain order as they waited for help. He yelled to the crowd in the store. But as the minutes dragged on, Ella's breathing quickened, and Jake could see her starting to withdraw again, caught in the whirlwind of emotions. "Ella, remember what we talked about." The sound of sirens cut through the air, growing louder as they approached, but as Ella turned towards him, her face paled, and he saw the battle raging within her. "Jake," she said, fear clouding her eyes. "You can," he urged, stepping closer. The scene around them seemed to fade, the headlights of the ambulance flashing through the glass. In that moment, with chaos swirling outside, they were connected, two souls caught in the tide. As the paramedics burst through the door, ready to respond to the emergency, Jake realized the weight of that moment. The trembling in Ella's hands was more than just fear, it was a crossroads. He reached out and took her hand firmly, locking eyes with her. "No matter what happens next, you've already begun your journey." But just as he spoke, chaos erupted as the paramedics took charge, and the reality of the situation seeped back in. Jake felt the urgency in the air, the need for action, and as he turned to help the rescuers, Ella's grip on his hand started to slip, a thread unraveling at the seams. She whispered, her voice trembling again, the world around them blurring. And suddenly, as the chaos unfolded before them, Jake realized with a start that not only was Ella standing on the brink of her own battles, but they were both teetering on the precipice of a much larger struggle, and the stakes had just shifted drastically. As darkness loomed and the sirens wailed around them, a new chapter awaited, filled with uncertainty and the fire of transformation. The unpredictable chaos of the outside world seeped into their moment, and the two of them were left to confront what was about to come next. Would they find the strength they both needed, or would the tide overtake them? The deeper secret of this encounter was only beginning to unfold.